We're now going to move on to coordinates and drawing by coordinates. The first type of coordinates that we're going to be looking at are called absolute coordinates. And the first thing I need you to do is open up the file attached to this video. It's in the resources section. And once downloaded, the file is called absolute coordinates. So I'm sure by now you've noticed the grid on our screen, ignoring what I have drawn here, but in the background we have this grid here. So this grid actually means something. It is referring back to our XY. So where our X and Y meet, our coordinate is 0, 0. And each one of these heavy lines is 500 millimeters. And the lighter lines are 100 millimeters. So that's why I've drawn out this grid here, just to make it a bit clearer so we can understand it. And down in our status bar, what we need to show here are our coordinates. And when you first install the software, this isn't visible. So we need to turn that on. To do so, go to the customization on the right hand side. And at the top we have coordinates. And here we have our X and Y coordinate will appear in this section here. So down here with our coordinates, we have our X first. X is always first. And then second is Y. Third, we have Z. So from this point here, Z will go up. If you're using 3D CAD, you would have a Z figure. But as we're using 2D only, this will always be 0. So you can see as I move along the X axis, our X figure is increasing and is displaying the X coordinate. And as we move up the Y axis, you see the Y figure moving and it is displaying our Y figure. One drawing method within AutoCAD is when we're using our line tool, we can specify our start point with XY coordinate, and we can specify our endpoint with XY coordinate. And the way in which we do that is we'll select our line tool. We'll come back into our drawing. Previously, we used our cursor to click and specify our XY coordinate, and then we'll click again to specify our endpoint. So what we want to do now is we want to accurately specify our X and Y position. And to do that, we will click on the hashtag or pound symbol. And you'll notice on my dynamic input, when I click on the pound symbol, you'll see that that is now locked in gray. And then to the right of that, we have numbers in blue. So when the numbers are in blue, it means that they are editable, so we can change them. And when they're grayed out, they are fixed and locked and we can't change them. So as the X is in blue, the software is looking for the first point, so our X point. So the first point that I want to mark on our drawing is 100. And how I now jump over to the Y coordinate is I'll press the comma key. So now you can see on the dynamic input, the pound symbol is locked in. My X coordinate is now locked in at 100, and it's now waiting for me to give the Y coordinate. So for my Y coordinate, I will give a figure of 200. And to complete the action, I'll press enter. And you can see now my cursor has jumped to X 100, Y 200. That is how we draw using absolute coordinates. So within the notes, in the short explanation about absolute coordinates, there we have an example of a shape. And we're going to quickly draw that as a bit of practice. So our first point there is X 200, Y 300. So first thing we need to do is we need to activate our line tool, as this is the tool we want to use. So we'll select line tool. We now want to instruct the line tool that we want to draw in absolute coordinates, and we do that by hitting the hashtag or pound key. And our X is always first, and our X is 200. Our Y is 300, and we jump over to the Y by hitting the comma key. 300, enter, and there's our first position. When drawing in absolute coordinates, we don't actually need to use the mouse, so we can just ignore the mouse and just focus on the keyboard and the screen. What we're going to do is we're going to work our way around that object clockwise. Our next point is X 300, Y 700. So as we're still within the line tool, we just have to hit the hashtag to tell the line tool that we're going to enter in the coordinates using absolute coordinate, then type in the X, comma, Y, enter. And again for our third point, pound key, 700, comma, 600, enter. And pound key, 800, comma, 200, enter. And to return back, we'll re-enter the first position. So hashtag 200, comma, 300, enter. And enter to complete. So now we can double check on this grid how we've drawn that. So our first one is 200 on the X, 300 on the Y, that's correct. 300 on the X, 700 on the Y, that's correct. 700 on the X, 600 on the Y, correct. 800 on the X, 200 on the Y, correct, and back to the start. So examples of where you would use the absolute coordinates would be on site plans, where we have our easting and northing. So our X and Y would then become our easting and northing. And this is how we can create our site plans. Okay, now we've finished with this drawing. So my advice again is to close it down and don't save it, so you can come back to it in the future and it's a fresh drawing ready for you to practice again. But we'll go back to our main project file. So we'll X to close it down and don't save it.